I'm Luke from Vext, and welcome to Should the Billable Hour Remain King? This is one of Vext's Uptime webinars. So today we've got some fantastic panelists who will be diving deep into this topic with us. The first panelist I'd love to introduce is Erin. Erin has over 20 years of experience in family law practice and has been the director of Portia Law for the past 10 years. Portia is the major provider of family law in New Zealand, and it also provides remote access legal services. Erin is one of the many lawyers who don't typically work on an hourly basis. Vicky, our other fantastic panelist, was a lawyer for over 20 years, and she is now a positive psychology practitioner and wellbeing consultant for organisations in New Zealand. Her multidisciplinary background makes her a treasure trove of practical advice on wellbeing and resilience. She works as a consultant aiming to help organizations become happier and more productive environments. Myself, I'm Luke, CEO and co-founder of Vext. Vext is a cloud-based phone system that lawyers use because we save about up to 5 minutes per phone call by automating tasks like recording time and creating file notes and practice management systems. Fantastic. Well, without further ado, I'd love to jump into the conversation. So my first question that I'd love to share with the panelists is, why do you think lawyers use time spent as a basis for billing clients?
I would put that down to tradition. It's something which has been done for decades, and I tend to find the profession is hesitant about change. I find the answer of, well, this is how we've always done things, is quite a common reply when I ask, but why? There is a simplicity to using the hourly rate, and it's understandable to the lawyer and also to the client. But I suspect that one of the reasons is a resistance to looking at how we do things and why we do things and whether they should be done differently.
I've come across a lot of the same sentiment in my kind of conversations with people in the legal community over the last few years. A bit of a follow-up there. I wonder, have you seen those kind of attitudes change at all in the last few years?
I think it has in terms of delivery of services by video link or remotely or from different locations. That was something that Portia started to do maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and when we did start to do that, we were subject to some criticism around whether or not we would be able to properly assess the veracity of what our client was telling us, whether we could build the trust and confidence element that's the basis of a solicitor-client relationship, and it needed us to give up a concept of bricks and mortar being the only way that we can deliver services, as if we're 1 metre away from each other. And I think that that's one of the good things that the pandemic has brought us, is that ability to rethink where we work from, how we work, and how we connect with each other and where our services are delivered from. But with the hourly rate, for me, it was a forced change, as the Ministry of Justice funding model for legal aid 10 years ago shifted from an hourly rate into a fixed fee model. And therefore, for us to be able to deliver a service, we were forced to change our thinking around how do we do this when we're operating under a fixed fee. So if there's no driver for change, then the question is, what might motivate people to change? And for us, it was we had to.
The same obviously applies with the criminal system.
Right.
Pretty much is on a fixed fee.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? So yeah, it is it's a blunt tool, isn't it? The billable hours, and all professional services firms, I imagine, use it in some way or another, and probably in-house lawyers probably don't maybe use a 6-minute measurement, which seems to be the one that law firms use, but I still imagine they have some form of measurement, because it's a good, you got two ways. And I know that the Law Society's rules of conduct give about 10 different measures that should be used when assessing what you're going to charge a client. So I know it's there, and it's very blunt and sometimes very unsatisfactory, but it does provide just one of many other sort of factors that should be considered in what you're charging a client, like, skill involved with the person and the complexity and the urgency and all those things that come into billing on a any matter that you're doing.
I kind of hear what I'm hearing from you is taking considering a more holistic approach is really important, as opposed to just thinking about the billable hour.
Although the time recording is not simply for the purposes of the billable hour, in that it's also around accountability of the staff member to the employer about how they're utilising their time throughout the day, and a requirement, as Vicky said, under the regulation. So even though legal aid is still done on a fixed fee model, I'm still required to record my time for what I've done for the task. In the event that there is a file audit, that it can still be seen. Or similarly, even if we're operating under a fixed fee model for a privately paying client, if there was to be a complaint or review of fees, then the timesheeting is still a measure, though, as Vicky quite correctly says, not the only measure. But I think lawyers tend to focus on, this is how I measure and this is the measure, my time, and don't look at the other criteria, which is possibly because the other criteria are harder to explain or justify, or are more subjective than I was definitely at court for an hour. I know it was, I recorded. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be using them, and it doesn't mean it's too hard basket though.
I mean, like everything, if you become a real expert in a particular area of law, and then something happens to come across your desk which is worth X amount, but it actually takes you, say, even only 10% of the time, because you've become so skillful and expert in doing that, well, I don't think there's any reason why you should discount your time on that basis. Did you understand what I'm saying? And the converse is true. If you are really inexperienced, so it takes you, it's like when you're a young lawyer and it takes you 10 hours to do something which probably somebody else may have only taken 2 or 3, the client shouldn't necessarily be expected to pay.
Well, time recording is an unnatural discipline. Like we spend so much time not being required to allocate our time, that to suddenly think about our time in real-time recording, which is what my preference is, versus a unit versus a whether it's a 6-minute unit or a 10-minute unit or a 12-minute unit, is very unnatural. And for a junior lawyer, I think it's difficult to get into a habit as well of actually having to write down what you've done and how long you've done it. You've done it for. And so if it comes back to billing, the number one thing is, if you haven't recorded your time under an hourly model, you're not going to be charging it. So, that's one of the flaws of focusing at that billable models. It does rely on an accuracy of people actually recording what they have done, because otherwise there's leakage, because if they've actually done 3 hours but the time she did 1, they're not going to be billing 3 hours. And so it is something that takes training to be able to get into the habit of doing, which doesn't mean, even if we're operating under a fixed fee model, that we ought not be time recording. But under a fixed fee model, unless you are going to scoop up the fee, rather than under the hourly rate, if there is inaccuracy or inadequacy in time recording.
Yeah, it's interesting, because at Vex we work with a lot of law firms, of course, and we kind of see lots of different approaches to billing models and training and support around billing for lawyers and fee earners inside of firms. And it's really interesting. We see a lot of diversity in that as well, and often from my experience, it comes back to the areas of law that a firm specialises in. But I know that about 20% of billable time goes unrecorded across the legal industry as a whole. So there's definitely some gaps to be filled there.
And also to look at where the efficiency gains lie as well, because one of the things that we've had to do to achieve a fixed fee model is to look at where we can be more efficient. And that comes down to, we've ditched dictation. We're trying to get documents precedented. We're trying to look at where there's repetition of activity, whether that is standardizing templates, standardizing our advice, to make sure that we are doing things as quickly as we can, because the quicker we are, then the more benefit there is to us from the fixed fee, and particularly when you're working on fixed fees which are a decade out of date. You need to be very efficient to be able to be making the most of what you can out of the fee that's available to you, which is where efficiencies had to be a driver for us, and utilising technology as a way of doing that too.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think the billable hour model, do you think it impacts the well-being of legal staff?
Yeah, well, I would obviously start saying it can massively affect the well-being of lawyers. That pressure of knowing that you've got to bill and perform to a certain level can have a massive impact on your work-life balance and your own individual well-being, and then the collective well-being of your whole organization, because it smacks of creating quite a really competitive environment. If there's people that are at work 12 hours a day to make sure that they get their billables right up, which we all watch those horrible American law firm on TV programs, etc., LA Law, etc., and people just work all hours of the day. And then if you're somebody who wants to have much more of a work-life balance, but you're not prepared to do that, it can create a real imbalance within the firm, and it leads to obviously a lot of competition between one lawyer and another. And also, I'd really question whether it then leads some people to choose not to do non-billable work over billable work because they want to keep their billables up. And I know that my husband is a lawyer, and he sort of said to me that, the Chief Justice has said that she's really big on access to justice at the moment. And that means law firms and individuals doing a lot more pro bono work, which really helps gives people a lot more meaning to their day. If you know that it's really expected, and that you do other stuff other than billable hours, then I think it can really help with your well-being and creating that meaning and purpose in your work, which is really important to your well-being.
Well, I think the Aotearoa Legal Workers Union would certainly say that long hours for unfair remuneration is not just an LA law style issue. I think it comes back to what is the culture of the firm in which the person's working, what is a reasonable workload for an ordinary working week, and what is fair pay for that the work that is being done as well. There are many different drivers for different people. If I had someone who was working 12-hour days repeatedly, I'd be wanting to know why. Having said that, I have just worked a crazy number of hours in a crazy number of days consecutively without a break. That wasn't driven by my billing model. That wasn't driven by whether it was an hourly rate. It was driven by the fact that you get a feast or famine in terms of court time, and I feel that we're working in a broken system, in that I have had two matters who were waiting for court time to become available for between 8 months and 18 months each, And so when the court time became available, I found it very difficult to say no to doing that, because of my dedication towards wanting to make sure that those clients were able to actually finally get the hearing time that they needed, even though that meant considerable preparation time and considerable focus by me, and having to juggle a number of different things all at once. For litigation, I think it's very difficult to, when you get multiple deadlines coinciding all at once, which are outside your control, and a system which still does not place sufficient focus on accessibility for the client or the well-being of the lawyer within the system either. So it's the hours that we do are not solely driven by remuneration, not solely driven by hitting a clock time, or an expectation from that particular employer to be the first in the office and the last out. I find that is a really outdated way of thinking and a very outdated way of valuing your staff, as opposed to looking at other things as well around the quality of the work that they do, the relationships that they have with the clients, the feedback you're getting from the clients, and their skill set as well.
I did a cultural audit of a law firm, a big law firm in Auckland, and interviewed staff, and it was mind-boggling to me. But one of the lawyers I interviewed said that one, she wasn't allowed to go to lunch unless she went at the time of her partner. A strong theory of in wellbeing and positive psychology is the fact that about motivation, and motivation needs to be intrinsic. So having this billable hours is like having the carrot and the stick, and I'm not saying it's bad, but for you as a person to feel motivated, it should come within yourself. And the whole billable hours model is about imposing something on you. You need it, and it's very necessary, but you want to be able to work well for the sake of your desire to do your best work and enjoying the challenge of it. And so I think it's really important to remember that and think about that in terms of your work, as to whether you're getting where your motivation is coming from when you're doing your work.
I think that's where clear articulation of what the values of the firm are and the vision of the firm as well. Where with Portia, we do have a strong articulation on our values of access to justice and providing assistance. So I think all of our staff, whether lawyers, whether they are in our support team, know that that's the purpose that we're there for, and are all part of that purpose, that everyone's role fits into achieving that. The lawyer is of no greater importance than any other staff member in the firm, because at the end of the day, we've all got to do our jobs to be able to achieve that outcome. And when you know why you're coming to work, and that you are truly making a difference for the person that you are delivering the service to, then that can be a very fulfilling aspect as well, particularly if you are working with challenging clients. You don't always receive the gratitude that you potentially should get, and that's where recognizing that from within as well, and giving that praise to people, is really important as well when people have done a really good job, because sometimes it isn't always acknowledged externally. So it needs to be acknowledged within the firm from your other colleagues, and also in particular from the senior people in the staff as well. I love our weekly wins board, where it doesn't matter whether it's your own win. If you've done a win, you put it up on the board, but in particular, if you notice that somebody else has had a win, And I don't mean a win on a case. I just mean any win, anything that they have achieved that is great, or that is new, or that is whether it's client related or a personal development one, we can put it up and share that. And I like that as a value. And certainly if I'm having a bit of a bad day and I go in and see what everybody else is doing and how they're achieving, it makes me feel good too.
Yeah, and it also might make you reflect back and actually remember the good things that have happened. You're feeling like nothing's good happened in your day, but that makes me think about the attention we need to pay to the negativity bias that we have within us and that's out there, because the research shows that for every positive emotion you feel in your day, if you have one negative thing happen to you, that's what you remember. So the guy who toots aggressively as you're trying to get into your car park, he thinks you've stolen it, and you feel all pent up, and if you think back and think, actually, a whole lot of good things have happened in my day. It's just that the negative outweighs the positive so greatly, and we really need to really focus in on that. And that's why they, in wellbeing and positive psychology, we do sort of bang on about the fact that you've got to remember all the good things, and it's not just a happy clappy kind of thing. It's because of that the weight of negativity has in our world. And you open the newspaper and everything you read makes you feel so you actually have to go out and search for the good stuff.
We've got a question here from someone in the audience. What is your advice for someone who might work for a lawyer that has one of those older perspectives, maybe not being allowed to leave before a certain time, say past your expected hours or contracted hours, things like that?
Can you go and speak to your HR? Help them help you. That's the job, really, isn't it? And especially in this day and age of the demand for good staff, they talk about the great resignation and stuff. I think everybody's in a very good position to have a really high expectation of how they should be treated in the workplace. And
I think that's a really relevant point, to be honest. Especially in like a really small firm, say, you might not have the opportunity to talk to an HR kind of person or team, and so it might be the case that you're kind of looking for better opportunities somewhere else. And
I think we undervalue what our value is to our employer. It is really difficult to find people who are skilled. I've spent a lot of time having to train people from scratch, and if you started to change your way of doing things, would it actually be questioned?
Changing tune a little bit, I wanted to jump over to, as opposed to the kind of service providers, thinking a little bit more about kind of consumers of legal services. So I was wondering what you two thought about, has there been a shift in consumer expectations as to the services being provided and pricing models? Are more customers expecting fixed fee services, and kind of what other kind of changes do you think have happened, are happening at the moment?
Where I see a change there is how the client asking, how much of this can I do for myself? So I think there's still an expectation from the client that there is likely to be an hourly rate model available, although, and I do offer an hourly rate model as well, but we do offer the fixed fee model, because I think what the consumer wants is certainty around what the charging is going to be, so they can budget for it. So with the what can I do for myself, that's where we're looking more at unbundled services. On our website, we have solo plus us, and in a classic kind of fee model. If you think about it like Air New Zealand, where you've got your seat only fee, your seat in your bag, or whether you want to put some luggage in the hold as well, and how many suitcases you're bringing. But certainly with the changes that were made quite a number of years ago to try and assist people to self-represent in the family court, that for me has been one of the bigger areas, is how can we assist self-representing people.
What do you think changing technology, what do you think the impact of that is on kind of delivery of services, but also how kind of law firms might be working together internally?
With COVID in the last 2 years of people, basically working remotely, and then now the sort of pressure of some people now wanting to continue to work much more remotely, because it really helps their own work-life balance, especially if you've got a huge commute to work and things like that. Firms are having to really sort of, as much as they want people back in the office, there's a real arbitrage between what some of their staff want from their working life and what the firm wants, and working through all that to make sure that everybody's needs are met and you still can get that connection and that building of relationships in the workplace. I mean, we all know it's really hard to feel connected if you're sitting at home behind a screen doing your work 5 days a week. And those sort of what we call those water cooler moments, those moments of connection that you get by being in a place, talking to somebody, going down in the lift with somebody, how's your day going? I know for younger staff members a lot that they've really missed out on that in the last few years by the whole COVID experience. Law firms, lawyers, and any organisation now know that, putting a real emphasis on your staff wellbeing is so absolutely paramount. 5 years ago, people would have thought that wellbeing in the organisation might just mean putting out some fruit bowls and telling people that they've got a free fitness class. Well, I think they understand that workplace wellbeing goes so much further than that in this day and age, and it's the amount that firms invest in their employee wellbeing, is the investment is paid back many times over.
Well, Luke, accessibility and technology, you kind of hit on one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Accessibility for clients, the ability to provide services to people who are provincial and may not have someone in the area who has the expertise in the area that they want, the ability to access legal aid lawyers when there's significant conflicts of interest, or a reduced pool of people available, the ease to be able to access advice, whether by phone or by video link from your home, because why shouldn't you? And we need to be looking at then how that impacts on what we're providing for our staff who are parents themselves, and the ability for them to be able to meet children's needs. And that's both parents. That's not having a parent who is the one who has to take the time off when a child gets sick, but both parents being responsible for being able to provide that care, because your measures ought not to be the amount of time sitting at a desk.
We've had a fantastic conversation today, and I'd love to hear from both of you. How can the audience follow up with you after the webinar?
I can put my email. I'm happy to chat to anybody if they want to email.
How about you, Erin?
I'm on LinkedIn, and support at portia.law.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks so much, Erin and Vicky, for sharing your thoughts on should the billable hour remain king, and all of the other topics that we have delved into today. It was a really fantastic conversation. So thanks so much. And with that, we'll close up.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Vicky.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.